He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Back in the, late 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't unheard of for people to ring up and ask to speak to it's Mr. Scott there, because they just look up the phone book and go, oh yeah, Scott's the surname and so on. And I used to take great delight, because I'm quite a few years older than my brother and he was still at high school at the time, and I'd say, oh no, sorry, he's at school this week. But that sort of, you don't get that anymore. You don't get that assumption that if you're going to ring a farm, you're going to want to ask to talk to the man.
Yes.
I mean, we're reasonably anomalous in being as female dominant as we are, I guess, but
we have employed blokes at times.
Yeah, we do.
We're not a guinea idea.
Yeah. We're not sexist.
You're not. Do you give men opportunity?
Yeah.
Lucky them.
Our diversity and inclusion program.
It's a bloody freezing morning in July when Fran and I drive to Kate Scott's home on Reese Valley Station. Reese Valley Station is only a short drive from Glenorchy on Lake Wakatipu, where Kate farms merino sheep and Hereford cattle. It's just gone 7:30, and Kate had already told us they're not big on early starts on a Sunday. Fair enough, neither am I. Unless of course they're shearing or mustering. So to kill some time, we go for a drive up the valley, with mountain ranges looming on either side of the road. It's impressive. In fact, so impressive, it features in many Hollywood movies. More on that later though. Fran takes the opportunity to get some photos in the soft, early morning sunlight. And as we're exploring, we notice there are quite a few new homes on the hills. We'll talk about that later on too. Kia ora, I'm Āpage Tarato Rangikura. He uri no Ngāti Raukawa, Ngai Te Rangi, Ngāpuhi me Ngāti Rārua. This is Far From Town, made by Shepherdess and RNZ. Stories of women at the end of windy gravel roads and up remote valleys across Aotearoa. At a more civilised hour, we come back down the valley to Kate's place. We start our morning sharing a cup of tea at the dining table in the homestead with Kate and her mum Iris. Kate, who runs the farm, is in her late 40s and only took over from her mum Iris, who was in her late 70s, a couple of years ago. Kate's sister Diane, also known as Fuzzy, helps out. So does their younger brother Eric, a helicopter pilot, who lives next door with his wife Steph and daughter Miller.
So I'm Kate Scott, and I live on Reese Valley Station, which is near Glenorchy at the head of Lake Wakatipu, and my whānau have been here since 1905, with a little bit of a gap. It's complicated, as they say, but so this is the family farm, I guess.
This family's always been to make enough money to educate the kids into whatever field.
This is Iris, by the way.
But the brother, of course, was the expensive one.
So I want to be a helicopter pilot. Oh, good. Yeah.
Oh, great. Jeez.
However, he's
bloody handy.
He's a very handy man to know these days. Yes, no, it's good having an on-call pilot. That's definitely true.
I can imagine here, yes.
Oh, that's your washroom.
Yeah, so that's the laundry. So we're just coming through the porch where all the multiple boots are.
Cup of tea over, Kate takes me on a tour of the farmhouse. There are portraits of ancestors all over the walls, painted and photographed, and it reminds me of that calming feeling you get when you walk into a wharenui.
This is my great-grandfather who originally bought the property in 1905, so that's Henry. She was younger with her siblings, so they had such massive families in those days, so that's
Is this out the front?
This is actually at her family home in Alexandra, so this is her mother here, the one they called the Duchess, so that's Sarah Cameron, so...
Oh, she does look like a duchess, doesn't she? She's gorgeous. Staunch shoulders.
Yeah.
She's got good eyebrows. Yeah.
And so these guys are... One of them is Henry's father, who was also Henry, and we've never been exactly sure which one, but we've always assumed it was the shortest one because we're all quite short in this family. So we're like, well, probably that's our one there. So.
I can see the likeness in the
Yeah, I think that's
and what's this? Where is this?
So that's Alexandra in the very early days. So that's the connection to Kate. So that's where she grew up, and so Henry died reasonably young of TB, as people did back in the day, and Kate actually sold the run country. She never sold the freehold paddocks down here around the house, but she sold the rest of the place to some other people and moved back to Alexandra. So this is my grandfather here, so this is Henry's son Doug and his wife Jean. So Kate went back to Alex to kind of be with her family, and her kids went to high school in Alexandra. And then Grandpa actually went up to Oamaru to Waitaki Boys for a while too, but yeah, anyway, details. But so these are kind of more farming history related photos on this side, obviously, so more landscapey shots. That's a cool one, isn't it? Yeah, that's Reese Valley cows going up the river.
Wow.
While there are plenty of male ancestors in those portraits, the farm nowadays is proudly run by women. The only boys are brother Eric, the dogs, and the stairs. I'm curious how the farming community feels about that.
In my experience, this community and the kind of general high country community are pretty...
We'd be among the first to get liberated, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's actually not unusual for women to be really involved in the farming in the high country world, and in this particular community. I mean, nobody who lives here has ever said to me, "Oh, what do you think you're doing being a farmer?" Like, there's never been that attitude. So when you strike it from somebody else, from like outside your usual realm of, it's really quite weird. Like, I remember a new buyer for one of the meat companies came once, and at the time we had a woman working for us, and it was you and me and Sonia in the yards.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy came and, introduced himself, had a chat, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I better get going before I get estrogen poisoning. And we were all like, we just kind of looked at him like, okay, you just get going then. Like, so it's like, I mean, he thought he was being funny, I think. Like, I think he was, like, he wasn't intending to be. But you just, every now and then somebody comes out with something like that and you just go, what?
Aside from the years she spent at Otago University, picking up a couple of degrees, Kate has always lived on the family's Glenorchy farm. Now she runs it, having taken over from Mum Iris. A fairly easy transition, as it turned out.
And we just kind of, over time we slowly evolved.
I got slower and she got quicker.
And it just happened.
And it just kind of happened, yeah. So my sister was in Australia for quite a while, so she did the WA thing for like 14 years, I think it was.
Was she farming? Or
No, she was in the mining industry.
Oh, the mining, yeah.
She started off cleaning in mining camps, and then she started cooking. She'd done quite a bit of kind of chefing, cooking, and she's kind of done just about every job it's possible to do in Glenorchy. Like, she'd worked at both of the pubs and the cafe, and she'd done horse street guiding, and she'd driven buses for the jet boat company, and she just took whatever jobs were, which I think is the thing that actually stands Kiwis in really good stead when they're overseas, is that kind of willingness to do whatever, So when she went to Australia and they were like, oh, well, we could give you a job, but it'll be cleaning, and she was like, okay, whatever. And then when they discovered that she could actually cook as well, and then and then she ended up in admin, so she's the queen of the spreadsheet. If you want a beautiful Excel sheet, she's the woman for the job.
Love
that. But she was still living in WA when the COVID thing happened, and it kind of really through her not being able to come home when she wanted to, like that whole idea that she might not be able to come back, and then also Miller was born, my niece was born right at the start of COVID, so she was like, I want to be able to, see her growing up, and
We don't actually see much of Fuzzy. She came in earlier, saw the mics, and literally reared back out of the door, so I'm gonna guess she doesn't want to be interviewed. That does mean, though, that Kate feels quite comfortable telling us all about her.
I've got a great story for you from yesterday, and this hasn't kind of happened for a while, this sort of thing, but Fuzzy and I were up the road. We were putting up a hot tape because we were going to shift some cows from one paddock down, and there's a place where they can get off the road onto the riverbed, and we wanted to keep them on the road. So we put this hot tape up, and this carload of people came along, and they pulled up next to us, older white gentlemen, and they said to us, oh, where are the men folk today? They're just at home watching sport, ha ha ha.
Oh my lord.
Fuzzy reared back like she'd been slapped. She was like, and she just gave this guy this like 1,000-yard stare, and then she just said, "There are no men folk on this farm." Turned around and walked off, and I was like,
I love that. This
but it's actually it's relatively unusual that you get something that overtly.
These days,
Yes.
I'm on board, Brad.
We go outside for a ride on the side-by-side bike to get a visual sense of the farm. As we ride, I'm reminded of the new houses we saw up the valley, and now I'm wondering what happens when lifestyle blocks meet working farms.
I mean, it's interesting. When the COVID lockdowns were on, we actually, and it feels kind of terrible to say it because I know it was really tough on lots of people, but we absolutely loved it because it was like so kind of peaceful and quiet, and like we could, one of the things we have here, because we kind of have these two separate blocks of land and we have to move the stock on the road sometimes, and that, when I was a kid that was not an issue, nobody thought twice about it. Now it's like a drama. There's like, I've got high-vis vests for the dogs, and we've got signs and we've got radios, and there's a vehicle ahead, and it's actually quite an exercise. And yeah, during COVID we just were like, let's just take the sheep up the road. It just wasn't an issue anymore. I guess in some ways potentially the catalyst was that when they sealed the road to Queenstown, so it became feasible for people to live here and commute to work in Queenstown. And whereas previously, when I was a kid, the road was gravel pretty much all the way, and it was pretty rough, and nobody in their right mind would like go to Queenstown daily. Like that would just have been seen as madness. Like people would be like, what? Like it just wasn't a thing. And now, now there is a cohort of people who live in Glenorchy and work in Queenstown. And, if they're lucky enough, they can do a couple of days working from home or whatever to kind of, especially this time of year, it's not a super fun road to be driving on. There's a bit of black ice and frost and stuff that's a bit scary. But we are actually super accessible, really. Queenstown is only an hour away on a good day. Depends what the traffic's doing if you want to get to the other side of town. But, there's the international airport there, so people can literally fly into Queenstown from wherever and then be out here in the space of an hour and a half kind of thing. And that's actually really, really accessible. Like it's,
Has that changed the vibe of the community energy at all?
Yeah, it has. And in both positive and negative ways, I think. Like, I'm always really wary of being like one of those people like, I've lived here my whole life and, don't like these incomers.
Yes.
That is, I think for most rural communities, if you're not growing, you're shrinking and you're dying, So it's a positive that we are somewhere that people want to come, but it's also, I think a lot of people don't quite grasp that, we have one road and it is vulnerable to, slips or flooding, or it was closed with a big fire once, and, stuff happens on our road, and because it's the only way in and out, it means that, and I'm not sure that everybody who lives here now kind of appreciates quite how problematic that could potentially be, because most of the time it's not, most of the time it's fine, but certainly the community has changed a heap since I was a kid, growing up here in the 80s, but mostly in positive ways. Yeah, I think, the majority of people that come here because they love the environment, they love the vistas and the natural world, and that's what they want to be kind of close to. And so I think most of us are kind of on that wavelength, we share that in common kind of thing. But, it is, I feel like we are becoming kind of increasingly suburban, and I definitely see that through the school.
Kate used to work at the school in the office, and even though she doesn't have kids herself, she reckons it's nice to have a connection to the school in a small community. She is still, for her sins, as she says, on the board of trustees as the secretary, though the school has changed a lot with all the new people coming in.
We're starting to feel more like Queenstown at the other end of the lake. When I first came home at the end of '98, went through this whole kind of community planning process, and the whole thing, we don't want to be like Queenstown. But it's actually really hard to resist that kind of inexorable creep. You know, I mean, I think one of the big things for me is there's a kind of a bit of a gap between the people who make their living here in this community and the people who make their living somewhere else and just happen to live here, and they kind of want their surroundings to be like this beautiful, peaceful environment where, you know, I mean, a big issue for us has been helicopter noise, which a lot of people are super anti, but well, obviously we have a vested interest in having a family member who's a pilot, but also, you know, we use helicopters for our work. We're super cognizant that, you know, if you were to fall over on the hill and break your leg, you really want to hear the helicopter coming, like you just, you know, and firefighting, search and rescue, there's a lot of film work happens up here and those guys use helicopters a lot. Like there's a whole lot of working stuff that needs that thing to, and whereas people kind of, there's this kind of expectation that it's quiet in the countryside, and it's actually not.
High country farming has an almost mythic status in Aotearoa, but Kate brings us down to earth with real talk.
I used to think of myself as just like a really normal average person just doing a really normal average thing, you know. And it eventually dawned on me that actually, you know, our lifestyle here is not, it's not average, it's not middle of the road, we are anomalous actually, the way that we live here, dictated to by nature and what's happening in the outside world. And also, you know, and there's that thing with small communities where you might not really like somebody that much, but you get on with them because you're part of the same community, and you may need that person one day, or that person might need you. And that's one of the big changes I've noticed, you know, as our wee community here has grown, is that people who come into a rural community from a more kind of urban or suburban background, they kind of don't really get that they need to be part of the whole, even if they don't like the person who lives next door or the person over the road or whatever. That actually it's really important to be part of that collective, and I think it's such a kind of suburban mindset that you don't need to talk to your neighbours, because, you know, you've got your friends wherever else or whatever, and you know you're going to catch up with them in Queenstown for a drink at the weekend or whatever. You know, that people are more, people coming from a more urban background are more kind of isolated in a way. Even people who are farming in other kinds of systems kind of struggle to get their head around the high country thing a bit, because it seems like, you know, there's all this space, like you say, you know, 46,000 acres, and but it's not kind of 46,000 acres of, like, you know, nice rolling green pastures.
46,000 acres. I find that quite triggering. As Māori, we are fighting every day for our land back. Even access is pretty hard to get. But driving around earlier in the side-by-side, while Kate points out the clouds and the animals and what those signs and movements mean, I can see how much her and her whānau care for the land. Everything I know about my own culture and how our ancestors lived reflected a lifestyle that was in response to the natural environment, sitting with and observing all that it tells us. And so, though it was hard to hear, I do feel a great sense of respect for the way Kate loves this whenua.
You know, we lived in a little bit of a bubble, I think, here when we were kids. You know, it was the end of the road, and not that many people came here, and we were kind of pretty able to just kind of, I mean, we were probably slightly feral kids, you know, just running around, riding ponies, swimming in the river, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And we were also super lucky that we grew up with grandparents on site too. So my dad's dad lived in the house next door where my brother and his wife are now, and my mum's mum had a little granny cottage through the, you know, at the end of the garden, and so yeah, we sort of had on-tap grandparents, and which meant that, you know, my parents could go and do whatever they needed to do on the farm, safe in the knowledge that there was, you know, some adult available to be there to look after us if we needed, you know, supervision, which we probably did. But yeah, when I was a kid we were running 7,000 sheep, and we're only running 5 now. So because we live in this higher rainfall area, our native scrub regeneration is quite intense. So we're actually losing grazing area every year too. Like, Manuka and Coprosma, and which is kind of like, well, it's not a bad thing, but it does become limiting on how many stock you can actually run successfully. So
Yes, that makes sense.
it's just a bit of a changing dynamic, really. Yeah. Also, the more animals you have, the more expensive they are to maintain. So,
Yes, that's true.
the input costs are kind of going up all the time, and the return is not necessarily. I mean, cattle returns this year have been amazing, but that's not every year. So, chasing cows with vehicles is difficult when you've got kind of like rough ground or river crossings and all that kind of thing. And on foot, you're not fast enough. Cows can easily outrun you on foot if they take it into their head that they don't want to do what you've. We do so much with cattle, particularly by bluff. You must move now, and they're like, all right, off they go. And you think, you actually outweigh me 20-1, but here I am bossing you around.
Speaking of bossing around, although Kate is in charge, Mum Iris is still a big presence on the farm. And while Iris has always let Kate find her own way to run the farm, her influence is there in the conservation values Kate practices.
Part of it maybe is the kind of vet school background, that actually the kind of the animal side of things has always been the joke. I was just thinking about this the other day. The joke always was when my parents first got married and she moved onto the farm, that the sheep all used to die out on the hill or down in the swamp or something, and now she'd go and collect them all up and bring them back and try and nurse them, and then they would die around the yard instead of somewhere further away. And she's always also been very conservation orientated. She was on the Otago Conservation Board for quite a long time, and actually my dad was too back in the day. Our big news this year was the release of takahe on our place back in February. So we actually now kind of crazily have the second biggest population of wild takahe in the world after the Murchisons, which is obviously their kind of like that spiritual home where most of the wild takahe are, but they have their breeding program has been amazingly successful, and they were looking for new places and we have a local pest control kind of consortium group that was like, we can make this happen, and they've done heaps and heaps of predator control, and it's been a really amazing kind of it kind of blows your mind to think that we're out mustering sheep and we can hear the takahe or see them sometimes even, and it's actually so that there's always been like a really kind of strong focus here on kind of minimal environmental impact and kind of maximising the kind of indigenous biodiversity that we already have.
These days, most farmers have to diversify, and the high country location means the station supports other businesses that go beyond traditional farming, something that Kate sees as being a big benefit to the local community.
There are several different businesses that operate here that are not our businesses, but that we kind of, we clip the ticket basically. Like it's the dream scenario for lots of farms, isn't it? It's like the, passive income where you don't actually do anything on a day-to-day basis, but there's a company that has a zip line on our place. There's horse trekking. There's heli skiing at this time of year. There's pack rafting in the summer on the river, and so there's a whole string of things. There's a bit of guided hunting and stuff, and heli hikes and that kind of thing. So there's a whole series of things that happen on our place that isn't about the farm, but is kind of contributing to the farm, and is also, I actually get quite kind of feisty about, is actually contributing to the community as well. Like that's giving other people the opportunity to create a business where they don't have the capital outlay of having to buy the land or to supply the venue. They're kind of most of those guys that we're working with, they pay us a set price or a percentage depending on what they are of however many people they are putting through. Then we get some of that. So that I think is actually a real bonus for like the whole community, is that there are these other businesses that operate on our land but aren't actually farming. Yeah, and the other issue which we have sort of touched on with Brad Pitt is the film industry stuff that we are super fortunate. It's all about proximity to Queenstown, really. Like, it's easy for people to kind of have the crew staying in Queenstown and then have everybody come out here and spend the day shooting whatever. And I mean, the thing about film is it's so unpredictable. Like, you can't budget for that because it's so random. Like, it's like kind of magic money that falls out of the sky from time to time, but it all kind of contributes to the overall whole of what we're trying to achieve here. So yeah.
Speaking of the film crews that come here, you have a really interesting story about a particular film crew that came.
Do I?
Did you catch the Brad Pitt mention back there? And the one much earlier when we went for a tour of the farm? Turns out Brad's the reason for our comfortable ride on Kate's brand new side-by-side, because Hollywood is another source of income for the farm.
Well, the most recent, big name person was Mr. Brad Pitt was here. But a few years ago we had Tom Cruise as well, so
Wow, so you really have had the big names of Hollywood.
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah. There he is, hanging on the key ring. Yeah, that's for the side by side who we have christened Brad in honour of Mr. Pitt, who funded the purchase of the side by side unwittingly. He doesn't know that, but
Bless him.
For some people, Kate being unmarried and living with her mum Iris would be seen as unconventional, but I just love how they rock it.
It works pretty well, yeah. I mean, the boss and I have been living together for 20 whatever years now, so
We haven't killed each other yet.
haven't killed each other yet.
That's good. You're still alive.
Yeah, we're both still alive. It's so interesting, I think, a lot of my friends say, oh God, I couldn't live with my mother, kind of thing, and I'm like, well, it's a big house, and we're kind of not in each other's face.
We've each got our fields of activity that
Yeah.
we get on with.
And you've got you've got a massive property. How many acres was it?
So we're 46,000.
46,000 acres. Yeah, so there's plenty of space to go have a huff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If you need to go and, bang in a waratah somewhere and let out some,
Go ride a horse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Take the dogs for a run behind the quad bike or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I guess because in some ways I never have really experienced anything else. Like, I went to boarding school and then I had 5 years at university in Dunedin, but I never really thought of, those other places as being where I lived. To me, I've always lived here and I just happened to be staying somewhere else so I kind of don't have anything else to compare it to in a way. Like, for me, I find it amazing that people kind of, the Glenorchy has grown a lot, and we actually have quite a lot of international people who've ended up here, and it kind of blows my mind to think of like leaving not just your hometown, but like your whole country, your whole hemisphere, and going somewhere else, and so quite a few of my friends here, I kind of have this group of friends that we do a bit of travel together sometimes, and there's the English woman, the American, and the French woman, and it's like a bad 80s joke, it's like we all walk into a bar, but it's kind of, it kind of blows my mind that those ladies have all like left the other side of the world and fetched up here, where they don't have, any kind of long-standing connection, or I just think that's so brave. Like, I don't know if I could do that, to be honest. Like, I think because I've always lived here and I've always kind of wanted to live here, trying to conceive of like picking myself up and going somewhere else is actually really kind of a bit mind-boggling. So, I don't know if I could actually pull that one off.
Thanks for listening to Far From Town, a podcast series from the team at RNZ and Shepherdess. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're following the series in your favourite podcast app to hear more stories of women living at the end of windy gravel roads and up remote valleys across Aotearoa. A heartfelt thank you to Kate Scott and her whānau who welcomed us in, shared so openly and gave so generously of their time. It was a privilege to sit at your table and hear your story. I'm your host, Āpage Tarato Rangikura, he uri no Ngāti Raukawa, Ngai Te Rangi, Ngāpuhi me Ngāti Rārua, presenter, writer and producer for the series. Francine Bourde captured photos and video along the way. You can see these on the webpage for this series. Felicity Connell is our researcher and production assistant, and Christy McGregor is the series producer. The series was engineered by the RNZ operations team. Justin Gregory is the executive producer for the series, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the production coordinator. Thanks to Janina Schwanica for all the great advice and guidance on the series. Tim Watkin is the executive editor, audio. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Have a listen.